The laughter hits me like shards of glass. It spreads through the ballroom, first as uncomfortable titters, then growing into full-throated cackles. 300 pairs of eyes are locked on me, watching for the crack in my composure, the telltale flinch that confirms I am indeed the joke my wife has just made me out to be. To 10 years with a man who's not even half the man my father is, Isabel says, her champagne flute catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. She's wearing a Valentino gown, $14,700 plus tax, charged to my American Express last week. A leech in a rented suit. I maintain my smile, the one I've perfected over a decade of Mercer Hamilton family gatherings. Small, pleasant, unremarkable, like they believe me to be. My mother-in-law, Vivian, draped in pearls that could fund a small nation's economy, leans forward, unable to resist adding her venom to the mix. If Isabel hadn't married down, you'd still be begging for leftovers and attention. More laughter. A senator's wife to my right fails to hide her smirk behind her hand. The hedge fund manager across from me stares with the pity one reserves for stray animals. I simply nod, raise my own glass, and take a measured sip of Dom Perignon that suddenly tastes like battery acid. I say nothing. I've said nothing for 10 years. Tonight, that changes. 2 hours later, I stand in our daughter Sophia's bedroom watching her sleep. 7 years old and blissfully unaware of the tempest brewing. Her mother hadn't bothered to say goodnight, too busy networking with the chairman of Morgan Stanley in the hotel's cigar lounge. I brush a strand of hair from Sophia's forehead and press a kiss against her temple. "I love you," I whisper. "Everything I'm about to do is for you. Someday, you'll understand." I close her door quietly and walk to my study. The house, a Georgian revival mansion in Greenwich that I purchased outright 5 years ago, is silent except for the soft hum of my computer as I enter the 16-digit code to access my private server. I press a single key. Execute. By morning, the Mercer Hamilton legacy will be nothing but ash. I first met Isabel Hamilton 12 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was 32, she was 28. I'd just closed my third successful venture, a financial technology startup I'd bootstrapped from my apartment and sold for $90 million. The press called me the Invisible Billionaire because I avoided photographers, declined interviews, and operated through layers of holding companies. Isabel was the opposite, a socialite heiress whose face regularly graced the society pages. That night, she wore a blue dress that matched her eyes and spoke with razor-sharp wit that cut through the banality of fundraiser small talk. "You're the only man here who looks bored by all this money," she said, appearing at my elbow. "I'm not bored by money," I replied. "I'm bored by people who have nothing else to discuss." She laughed, and something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. What a fool I was. We married 8 months later. Her father, Richard Hamilton, gave me a firm handshake and a cold smile at the rehearsal dinner. "Welcome to the family," he said, his voice carrying a subtle warning. "I hope you're ready." I wasn't. How could I be? The Hamilton dynasty stretched back 3 generations. Real estate moguls who'd shaped the Manhattan skyline and whose name adorned hospital wings and university buildings. They tolerated me because Isabel seemed happy and because my tech fortune complemented their old money credentials. What they never knew, what I made certain of, was that my wealth dwarfed theirs. That while Richard Hamilton posed for Forbes and bragged about his empire at dinner parties, I was quietly amassing a fortune that made the Hamilton holdings look like pocket change. I kept this knowledge close, a card I never played, because Isabel seemed to love me, and I loved her beyond reason. The first 2 years were good. Sophia arrived, perfect and tiny, and I thought I'd finally found what I'd been building toward, a family, a legacy of my own. Then the Hamilton facade began to crack. I remember the exact moment I realized my marriage was a transaction. We were at the Hamilton summer compound in the Hamptons. Sophia was 3, playing in the sand while Isabel lounged with her college friends. I overheard her, voice loose from too many mimosas. God, it's like living with a walking calculator. No personality, just numbers and spreadsheets. But the money makes up for it. Her friends laughed. I froze, sandcastle mold in hand, as she continued. Mom says I should be grateful he's so uncomplicated. No affairs, no drama, just works and hands over the credit card. The perfect provider. And does he provide well? One friend asked, giggling. Well enough, Isabel replied. Though Dad says he's plateaued, tech bubble's going to burst someday, and then what? I finished the sandcastle with Sophia, praised her engineering skills, and walked back to the house. That night I began moving my assets. Not out of spite, not yet, but out of caution. I didn't confront her. Instead, I watched and listened. For months, I collected evidence of what I'd become in my wife's eyes. An ATM with a pulse. Then, 8 years into our marriage, Richard Hamilton's empire began to falter. The 2008 financial crisis had wounded him more than he'd admitted. Failed developments in Dubai and London had bled him dry. The great Hamilton fortune was built on leverage, and the house of cards was wobbling. Isabel came to me in tears one night, her carefully crafted confidence shattered. Daniel, I need to tell you something. Daddy's in trouble, real trouble. I listened as she explained, half-truths designed to appeal to my business sense rather than my heart. It's just a cash flow problem. The Hamilton Group is still strong, but we need an injection. An investment. She took my hands in hers. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. This is my family's legacy. How much? I asked, my voice neutral. 20 million, maybe 30. Her eyes searched mine. I know it's a lot. It wasn't, not for me. But I nodded gravely, as if calculating whether I could manage it. I'll look at the numbers, I said. And I did. I spent weeks reviewing the Hamilton Group's financials under the guise of due diligence. What I found was worse than Isabel had admitted. Richard Hamilton hadn't just made bad investments. He'd been cooking the books for years, using new projects to cover losses from old ones. A classic Ponzi scheme wrapped in blue blood respectability. I should have walked away. Instead, I created a solution that would become their undoing. I established a series of investment vehicles through banks in Singapore, Zurich, and Grand Cayman. Through these entities, I began purchasing Hamilton Group debt and injecting capital into key projects. On paper, a consortium of foreign investors was saving the Hamilton legacy. In reality, it was me, controlling everything through proxies and shell corporations. Richard never knew. Neither did Isabel. I made certain the terms were favorable to me, though not punitive enough to raise suspicions. I was the invisible hand keeping their empire afloat while they continued to treat me as an afterthought at family gatherings. For 2 years, I watched and waited. I recorded conversations, saved texts and emails. I documented every slight, every dismissal, every time Isabel or her parents made it clear I wasn't really one of them. I built my case methodically, the way I'd built my fortune, with patience and foresight. And I continued to fund the Hamilton Group, now owning 78% of its debt and controlling 65% of its assets through my network of companies. All while Isabel shopped, Richard boasted, and Vivian sneered at my middle-class manners. The 10th anniversary party was Isabel's idea, a grand celebration at the St. Regis, 300 guests, entertainment by a Grammy-winning artist. I paid for all of it, of course. It needs to be spectacular, she insisted. Daddy's announcing his retirement that night, passing the torch to Edward. Edward, her younger brother, whose business acumen consisted mainly of spending the family money and making excuses. I nodded, signed the checks, and finalized my plans. The night of the party, I dressed carefully in a bespoke tuxedo. Isabel barely glanced at me as our driver took us to the hotel. Try to smile tonight, she said, checking her makeup. These are important people. I always smile, I replied. The ballroom was exactly as Isabel had planned, opulent to the point of vulgarity. Crystal gold flowers flown in from Ecuador. Senators mingled with tech billionaires, old money gossiped with new. Richard Hamilton held court near the bar, looking every inch the patriarch despite the financial rot I knew was eating him from within. He didn't bother greeting me when we arrived. Vivienne air-kissed me from a foot away, her eyes already scanning the room for more important guests. "Daniel," she said, distracted. "That suit fits better than usual." I smiled. "Thank you, Vivienne. You're looking well." She was already walking away. Dinner was served, speeches began. Richard announced his strategic transition to an advisory role, positioning Edward as the new CEO. The room applauded. Isabel beamed with pride. Then it was time for the anniversary toast. Isabel stood, radiant in her stolen gown, and the room quieted. I expected platitudes, perhaps a begrudging acknowledgement of our decade together. Instead, I got the truth. "To 10 years with a man who's not even half the man my father is," she said, voice carrying through the perfect acoustics. "A leech in a rented suit." The silence was brief before the laughter began. I felt eyes on me, pitying, amused, embarrassed. Vivienne leaned in with her addition about marrying down, twisting the knife. I sat perfectly still, smiling that same small smile. But inside, a door closed forever. When I raised my glass in return, my words were measured and mild. "To the Hamilton family," I said, "may you reap exactly what you've sown." It passed as an awkward but unremarkable response. Only I knew it was a promise. The first call comes at 4:17 a.m. Isabel's phone lights up the darkness of our bedroom. I'm already awake, sitting in the armchair by the window. I've been there all night. "What?" she mumbles, fumbling for the device. Then, more alert. "Edward?" Slow down. "What are you saying?" I watch her face transform as her brother explains the inexplicable. Major Hamilton Group investors have simultaneously withdrawn funding and dumped holdings. The stock is in free fall in pre-market trading. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. "That's impossible," she says, sitting upright now. "Those investors are rock solid. Daddy vetted them himself." I remain silent in my corner, invisible as always. "I'll wake Daniel," she says finally. "Maybe he can make some calls." She turns on the lamp and flinches when she sees me, fully dressed, watching her. "How long have you been sitting there?" she asks. "Long enough." Something in my tone makes her pause. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, she looks at me. Really looks. "Daniel, did you hear what I said? The Hamilton Group is in trouble." "No," I reply, my voice calm. "The Hamilton Group is finished." Her confusion would be comical if it weren't so pathetic. "What are you talking about?" I lean forward slightly. Vivielle Marquand Capital, Singapore First Holdings, Cayman Strategic Investments, Zurich Asset Management. I list them one by one. "Do these names sound familiar?" She shakes her head slowly. "They should. They're the entities that have been keeping your father's Ponzi scheme afloat for the past 2 years. My father doesn't run a... Yes, he does. Has been for almost a decade. Taking money from new developments to cover losses from old ones. Classic fraud, just dressed up in Hamilton prestige." Her face pales. "How do you know this?" "Because I own those companies, Isabel. Every single one of them is me." The comprehension dawns slowly, then all at once. She stands, the silk sheets falling away. "You're the Anonymous Investor Consortium?" I nod. "But why? Why would you do this?" "At first? Because you asked me to save your family's legacy. I did exactly that. I stand and straighten my jacket. And now I'm done." "What does that mean?" It means I've withdrawn all support. Every loan called in, every line of credit frozen, every share sold. And I've released the real financials to the SEC, the shareholders, and the Wall Street Journal. I check my watch. The first story should be published in about 20 minutes. She lunges for her phone, either to warn her father or check the news. I'm not sure which. It doesn't matter. Why? She asks again, her voice breaking. Is this because of what I said last night? It was a joke, Daniel. Everyone knew it was a joke. Was it also a joke 8 years ago in the Hamptons when you called me a walking calculator? Or last Christmas when your mother told the Vanderwells I was new money without the charm? Or perhaps 2 months ago when you texted your brother that sleeping with me was, and I quote, the price of financial security. Her face tells me everything. You've been spying on me? Number, I've been watching you become exactly who you always were. I move toward the door. I'm leaving now. My lawyers will contact you about divorce proceedings. I've already arranged for temporary custody of Sophia. Given the impending fraud charges against your family, the judge was quite accommodating. You can't take my daughter. She's frantic now, scrambling to process the collapse of her world. Our daughter, I correct her, and I'm not taking her from you. I'm protecting her from what's coming. Which is what, exactly? I pause at the doorway. Consequences, Isabel. For you, your parents, the entire Hamilton facade. The SEC investigation alone will take years. The civil suits from defrauded investors will take longer. The criminal charges... I shrug. Well, that depends on how cooperative your father decides to be. Her phone pings repeatedly now. The news is breaking. Edward, Richard, probably Vivian too, all realizing simultaneously that their world is ending. You won't get away with this, she says, but there's no conviction in her voice. I already have. I turn to leave, then pause. Oh, and Isabel? The suit isn't rented. It's Tom Ford, custom made. The destruction of the Hamilton Empire makes headlines for weeks. Real estate dynasty built on fraud, screams the Wall Street Journal. Hamilton heir arrested in financial scandal, announces the New York Times. The story has everything: wealth, deception, family drama. The public is ravenous for details. I give them none. I remain, as always, invisible. My name appears nowhere in the coverage, just sources close to the family and anonymous whistleblowers. Richard is arrested first, led away from his office in handcuffs. The perp walk is televised, his ashen face broadcast to the world. Edward follows 3 days later, caught trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. Vivian barricades herself in the Hamptons compound until federal agents remove her. Isabel, to her credit, doesn't run. She faces the press with the same frozen smile she's perfected for society photographs. My family will fight these baseless accusations, she tells reporters outside their now frozen accounts mansion. The truth will come out. It does, but not the truth she's hoping for. The divorce proceedings move swiftly. Given the evidence, recordings, texts, emails documenting years of emotional abuse, the judge grants me primary custody of Sophia. Isabel gets supervised visitation, pending the outcome of her own involvement in the family's financial dealings. The Mercer Hamilton assets are frozen, but my personal fortune remains untouched. Isabel's lawyers try to claim it as marital property, but the prenuptial agreement I insisted upon, the one Richard Hamilton mocked as unnecessary for a man of your limited means, proves airtight. 6 months pass. The Hamilton Group is delisted from the stock exchange. The famous Hamilton Tower is sold at auction to cover debts. Richard pleads guilty to reduced charges in exchange for testimony against former partners. He's sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Edward gets 7 years for his role. Vivian avoids prison but loses everything: the homes, the cars, the art collection, even the pearls she wore to my wedding. And Isabel? The investigation clears her of direct involvement in the fraud. Her crime was willful ignorance and living off ill-gotten gains. She's left with nothing but her name, which is now toxic in the circles she once ruled. I offer her a job, not out of kindness, but precision. Legal assistant at Mercer Holdings, says the offer letter delivered by courier. Starting salary $50,000 per year. She takes it. What choice does she have? Her friends have vanished. Her resume is blank except for socialite and former board member of fraudulent family business. Her skill set begins and ends with planning parties no one will now attend. On her first day, she walks past the marble plaque bearing my name in the lobby. She rides the elevator to the 47th floor and sits at a desk outside a corner office she will never enter. She files documents, answers phones, and schedules meetings for executives who know exactly who she is but never acknowledge it. Every day, she sees my face on the business magazines in the reception area. Daniel Mercer's Quiet Revolution, reads one headline. The invisible billionaire steps into the light, announces another. I've launched a foundation for first-generation entrepreneurs, people without connections or inherited wealth. We provide funding, mentorship, and resources to those who, like me, built from nothing. The irony is exquisite. Vivienne now lives in Lyon, France, the only place where distant relatives would take her in. She posts occasional photos on social media, pretending her European retirement was planned. The comments are sparse, the engagement minimal. The world has moved on. Richard and Edward serve their sentences at a minimum security prison in Pennsylvania. I send them financial newsletters monthly, with no note attached. Just a reminder of the world continuing without them. Daddy, is that you in the magazine? Sophia, now 8, points to the cover of Fortune on our coffee table. It's been a year since the collapse, 6 months since the divorce was finalized. We live in a new home, smaller but warmer, filled with her art and my books. Yes, sweetheart, I reply. They did a story about the foundation. The one that helps people start businesses? That's right. She studies the cover thoughtfully. Mommy says you used to be different, quieter. I set down my coffee. Sophia sees her mother every other weekend, carefully supervised visits that I neither encourage nor discourage. It's her right to know her mother, complicated as that relationship may be. I was quiet, I acknowledge. Sometimes being quiet helps you listen, and sometimes it helps you think. But you're not quiet anymore? I smile. A real smile. Not the practiced one I wore for a decade among the Hamiltons. Not when it matters. Not when there's something worth saying. She nods, accepting this with a child's simple wisdom. I like you better not quiet. Me too, sweetheart. Later that night, after Sophia is asleep, I stand at the window of my study and look out at the city. Somewhere across town, Isabel is in her rented one-bedroom apartment, perhaps drinking wine and wondering how it all went so wrong. She never understood that I wasn't a leech in a rented suit. I was a silent architect, building and destroying with equal precision. My phone rings, a board member with a question about tomorrow's meeting. As I answer, I catch my reflection in the glass. There's no trace of the man who stood silent through a decade of calculated humiliation. That man is gone, replaced by someone who finally spoke his truth. And when he did, worlds crumbled. Sometimes I hear whispers, at charity events, in boardrooms, even in the hallways of my own company. Wasn't he just the leech in Isabel Hamilton's stories? I never respond. I simply smile, because they have no idea who pulled the plug, and I have no intention of being silent again. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.